They said that it was like finding a hidden message in our genetic code, the kind of mark an intelligent mind would deliberately embed as a watermark in our DNA. So the paper suggested that cephalopod eggs that were cryopreserved had arrived on Earth inside icy comets during the Cambrian explosion. So he proposed that an ancient intelligent species had seeded young planets with spores for billions of years, with the eventual goal of having a symbiotic relationship with the planet it seeded. We would then become galactic citizens.
What?
Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. Tonight we're talking about panspermia. Do you know what panspermia is?
No idea.
Well, let me enlighten you. Panspermia is a legit scientific theory, but we're gonna dive deeper into the more conspiratorial ideas later on. So the conventional story of how life came to be is that Earth was a special little rock, that life sparked through blind chemistry and selection billions of years ago when Earth was like a chemical soup. But what if we are not that special? Because for years, some of the most respected scientists in the world have been quietly wondering if life began somewhere else. What if we are not the product of this planet? What if we were delivered from space? What if there is evidence that suggests that we may have been seeded by an advanced civilization millions of years ago and we were supposed to phone them back when we were ready? We're gonna start with how life started on Earth and how that's weird as fuck. Because English astronomer Fred Hoyle actually came up with an analogy. He said that the likelihood of life spontaneously sparking here on Earth is similar to a tornado tearing through a junkyard and miraculously creating an aeroplane, which means it's pretty fucking unlikely. And that's actually the current theory that we have, which is abiogenesis, that life spontaneously sparked from lifeless chemical reactions in a chemical soup billions of years ago. But here's why there's a huge issue with this. Earth was formed 4.5 billion years ago, and during this time, it was called the Hadean Eon, which means that Earth was basically a molten planet full of toxic gas, volcanic ash, and rocks that couldn't solidify. Also, the Earth during this time was being bombarded by asteroids. It was being pounded hard by lots of asteroids. So life absolutely should not have started under those conditions. But here's where it gets weird, because back in 2015, a team of scientists found a zircon crystal that was 4.1 billion years old. Remember, the Earth was formed 4.5 billion years old, so this rock was formed just 4 million years after the Earth was formed. And inside this zircon crystal contained a secret that completely rewrote history. Sealed inside of it was a tiny amount of carbon, which contained the chemical signature of organic life. That's super weird, because it meant that something was alive 4.1 billion years ago, when we thought there was absolutely no life on Earth back then. The chemical signature showed that whatever was alive back then was already sophisticated and running complex metabolic machinery, which is very weird because it is impossibly tight for raw chemistry to become self-replicating life in just 400 million years. Plus, remember, the Earth was being sterilized by heavy bombardment of asteroids. So the question is, where did this life that we found in the zircon crystal come from? Panspermia is the answer, meaning it came from space. So either we are a statistical miracle or we are not original. And this theory is called panspermia. I know it sounds a bit like science fiction, life coming from space, but this theory was actually first championed by a man named Svante Arrhenius in 1908, who is in fact a Nobel Prize winning chemist. So he's not just some cook, he's actually very smart. He challenged the whole chemical soup theory, suggesting that the seeds of life were present everywhere in the universe, carried by space dust. But for that theory to actually hold some weight, biological life would need to somehow survive the harsh conditions of deep space, the extreme cold, the intense radiation, and the oxygen-less vacuum of space. So Svante started testing. He subjected certain microbes to temperatures up to negative 240 degrees Celsius. The coldest place on Earth is only negative 98.6, and it's the East Antarctic Plateau. So the coldest place on Earth is only negative 98.6, and he subjected microbes to negative 240 degrees Celsius. And to his surprise, when he reheated the microbes after they froze, they actually came back to life, which is weird because no environment on on our planet is that cold, which means that this could be a trait developed on another world. And since then, we have actually found many other extremophiles that entirely defy biological logic. We have found life thriving inside deep ocean hydrothermal vents at 400 degrees Celsius. Just for context, at 400 degrees Celsius, the human flesh would turn into ashes, and we found life living in these extremely hot hydrothermal vents. And we also have my favorite extremophile, the tardigrade, also known as the water bear. Look at this guy, isn't he so cute? It's a microscopic bear. Have you heard of the tardigrade before?
It's quite
super
cute,
hardy.
actually.
They can withstand like freezing temperatures and like extremely hot temperatures.
Yeah.
They're super hardy creatures. And also, I think we can find it almost anywhere in our planet. So I actually wanted to go and see if I can catch a tardigrade. Apparently,
I think you can.
Yeah, we can.
You can.
In like mossy areas, in swampy areas.
I've
we
seen
can catch
videos
them.
of people like just randomly on mosses that you find on the ground outside. You can just scrape them up and then try to...
Yeah, so cool, right? You can
Yeah.
keep your own tardigrade, your own water bear.
Yeah.
Where also it kind of looks like a shriveled thing. These tardigrades can endure temperatures from absolute zero all the way to boiling. They can also handle pressures 6 times greater than the deepest ocean trenches on Earth. And perhaps most importantly for the panspermia theory, they can actually survive the lethal vacuum and cosmic radiation of outer space. And this was actually proven in 2007 when the European Space Agency sent living tardigrades into orbit, exposing them to the unshielded vacuum and cosmic radiation of space for 12 straight days. These poor motherfuckers.
Actually,
Getting
if that's
tortured in
the
space.
case, does that mean that we can send light into Mars and like...
Yes, I'm pretty sure we can, because later on we'll see that there are other extremophiles too that can survive deep space. We just uncovered that the tardigrade can actually survive 12 days in space. So it's very possible that we can put tardigrades on Mars or on Pluto or wherever we
Maybe
want
they
to.
might just,
evolve
slowly
on their
evolve
own.
and mutate, and then a million years later you
Smart,
get
intelligent
another
tardigrades.
another species of human beings.
Yeah.
I
Who
don't
knows?
know.
Because that's what the theory of panspermia is suggesting, that instead of humans forming from microbes billions of years ago just solely on Earth, it suggests that microbes from space came to Earth, and then maybe it got mixed with a chemical on Earth and then it produced life. We don't really know. We actually don't know. Yeah, so back to the tardigrade. When the European Space Agency put them in space, they actually didn't expect any of them to survive. But the shocking thing was, when they brought the tardigrades back down, 68% of them were actually alive, and some even went on to reproduce. So space radiation, the vacuum, it wasn't a problem for tardigrades. And also, fun fact, do you know that mold was found on the International Space Station, the ISS that's orbiting around Earth? Mold, like the mold in our toilet was found on the space station.
So even in space, mold could grow.
Mold survives,
Damn.
And even in such a sterile environment, because the space station is supposed to be very clean. The astronauts, I'm sure they, try to keep it as clean as possible and as sterile as possible because they don't want any contamination, right? But they found out that, hey, wait, there's actually mold in the station. So one of the astronauts probably brought it with him.
Or maybe like
or
on
her.
his clothes.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh.
To space. So we know that there are very hardy microbes that can survive space, including mold and tardigrades. So now that we know that extremophiles can survive short trips, what about crossing the vastness of space? Because space is terrifying and infinitely large. And it would take millions of years for microbes or anything to travel space. So can biological matter sleep for that long? Well, in 2020, scientists drilled nearly 6,000 meters beneath the ocean surface and pulled up something that should not exist: ancient clay sediment that were, in fact, older than the extinction of the dinosaurs. But when they looked closer, they found something alive inside of it. Microbes. Yes, bacteria that had been trapped in the seafloor for 101 million years were found alive inside these clay sediments. And just imagine, like, these bacteria were around when the dinosaurs were roaming the earth, man. Ancient bacteria. But that's not all, and this is the part where it gets insane. Because when scientists tried to revive the bacteria, not only did they wake up, but they had a 99.1% success rate in doing so. And upon waking up, these bacteria immediately started multiplying, which means we now know that microbes can remain dormant long enough to survive a massive interstellar journey. So now that we know that life actually is resilient enough to survive the harsh temperatures, radiation, and incredibly long journey, what exactly were the delivery vehicles bringing it all to early Earth? Let's take a look at Exhibit B, the cosmic incubators, also known as asteroids or meteors. Because for a really long time, we thought that comets were just a ball of lifeless rocks and ice and dust. But recent discoveries have actually shown that these lifeless rocks contain the building blocks of life. Sir Fred Hoyle, the same guy we mentioned earlier, he was actually an early advocate of this theory, and he argued in 1978 that comets are the incubators of life. He spent 4 decades arguing that comets are like cosmic petri dishes capable of containing the ghost fingerprints of freeze-dried bacteria, that life was everywhere in the galaxy. And back then, nobody really took him seriously. He was considered a fringe scientist, and people laughed at him until recent discoveries actually proved him right. Because as it turns out, asteroids are loaded with a toolkit of life. For example, the Murchison meteorite, one of the most significant and oldest meteorites we have ever discovered. So this bad boy is 4.6 billion years old, older than the Earth. So it was around before the Earth was formed. And in September 1969, this meteorite fell in Victoria, Australia. And when scientists analyzed it, they found a high concentration of organic compounds, 100 different amino acids and nucleobases, which are basically the building blocks of life. So they found the building blocks of life inside this meteorite that was older than Earth. And then there's asteroid Ryugu, which gave us an amazing discovery just in March 2026 this year. A few years ago in 2019, a Japanese spacecraft Hayabusa 2 landed on asteroid Ryugu to collect samples. What scientists found were 23 different amino acids, the same kinds our body uses to build itself. And just 2 months ago, in March, a team confirmed that the asteroid contained all 5 letters of the genetic alphabet, meaning that the entire vocabulary of life was found inside asteroid Ryugu. And this is a genuinely new finding, because we didn't know that the cosmos could produce the entire RNA and DNA alphabet without a planet. The official press release from Japan's Marine Science Agency states, and I quote, supports the hypothesis that asteroids contributed to the prebiotic chemical inventory of early Earth. In other words, one of the most respected scientific institutions on Earth just confirmed that the chemical alphabet of life exists in deep space, and that asteroids could have delivered these molecules to Earth. Every building block is already out there, already arriving, before life on this planet ever began. And we have the receipts. There are trillions of objects and asteroids in space that might contain the building blocks of life. So panspermia is very possible. And here is where we get to the more juicy part. Because what if panspermia didn't happen by chance, by random asteroids just landing on Earth? What if it was directed, intentionally? So directed panspermia was formalized in 1973 when Francis Crick and Leslie Ogle published a 6-page paper titled Directed Panspermia. And Crick and Ogle were not cooks. Crick, in fact, had a Nobel Prize for unraveling the double helix. In the paper, they suggested that organisms were deliberately transmitted to Earth by intelligent beings on another planet, that we are a product of intelligent beings that seeded Earth billions of years ago. And I find it so interesting, so fascinating that 2 scientists, one a Nobel Prize winner, would actually write a paper like that and even suggest something like that. Isn't it risky for your reputation or career, you know? He must have been, I don't know whether to say confident or not, but maybe confident in his supporting theory.
Maybe it's just evidence that he has found really supported this theory, and he just had this idea in his head. And if you genuinely believe in something, why
not write a paper?
Yeah.
Just write a paper about it.
Yeah, because even before like the whole discovery of gravity, you know,
Yeah.
Newton, Albert Einstein, before that people wouldn't know. So
What
like
gravity
it's
is.
like what gravity
Yeah.
is.
I mean, we used to think that the Earth was the center of the universe,
Yeah,
and that the sun
like we were
revolved
the
around
most
Earth.
important one in the universe, or
turns out,
something
nope,
like that.
We're
Yeah.
not special.
I guess you know, sometimes when you believe in a theory enough, you should at least put it out there, and
That's true.
who knows, maybe like 200 years later
You
it will
might be right.
proven.
Yeah,
You might be correct.
Yeah, I so wish that Francis Crick is correct. It would be so much more interesting that we were seeded from space
here.
intentionally, like directed panspermia.
I don't think we were seeded intentionally, but
Wait till you see the evidence.
But I do think that Earth. I do think that Earth is special though. Like we're
Why?
special blue.
Because it's the only life we know so far.
It's just over the years, millions of years of how Earth was formed. The environment somehow created so much life.
Yeah, and the weird thing is everything is so precisely calibrated that can support us. Like, I think if the moon is just like maybe a few cm or a few meters off
the axis, gone.
Yeah, that's why it's so weird. Like, is it by design? You know, when everything is so precise, and there's also so much that we don't know. You know, which is why it makes talking about these kind of things interesting. I guess it's nice to ponder or wonder where we came from, what happened. So Francis Crick's proposal was simple. Okay, this is where it gets quite wild. And remember, this is a Nobel Prize winning researcher, scientist. He proposed that an unmanned ship sent by an advanced race of beings carried a cargo of microorganisms. The ship would travel for millions of years just to find a young, wet planet. Then it would deliver its cargo and evolution would do the rest. So these advanced beings were merely trying to make life anywhere life could survive.
So he's saying that like a ship, not even like a rock?
He suggested. Because I think he was arguing for directed panspermia. But he was very careful not to sound overconfident, like this definitely happened. He was just throwing out possibilities, things that could have explained directed panspermia.
Damn, okay.
The paper even suggested that there was actual evidence inside of us that supports this theory. And the paper pointed to a very special mineral that we can find inside our very own bodies. So we have a very small trace amount of something called molybdenum, which is a mineral in our bodies. And molybdenum is super important for us because it's something our bodies use for detoxification. So without it, we would die. And here's the strange part. Molybdenum is relatively rare in Earth's crust. So the question is, why did life build itself around such an important element that is so hard to come by on Earth? Francis Crick says that the chemical composition of living organisms must reflect to some extent the composition of the environment in which they evolve. So perhaps right inside our bodies is the geochemistry of a different world, a world in a star system far away that had an abundance of molybdenum, one where our ancestors actually came from, our parent star. And we do know that there are certain stars that contain a lot of molybdenum. So if directed panspermia is true, and I hope it's true, please be true, then a very strange possibility actually opens up. What if whoever seeded us knew that we would evolve, and given enough time, we would start to zoom in on our own genetic code, and then we would ask the question, where did we come from? What if, to answer us, our seeders left a message, a watermark, hidden in our DNA? Because as it turns out, some very smart scientists actually think that they might have found this message. Because in 2013, Russian scientists claimed to have found the wow signal of our genetic code. Do you know what the wow signal is?
Like this crazy signal that they received from space, and then like it lasted a very long time
About
or something.
1 minute, 72 seconds lah. But which is considered quite long already, you know, to receive such a signal like that.
They just don't know where it
we don't know where it came from. So that's exactly what the wow signal is. In 1977, a radio telescope in Ohio, which was scanning space listening for alien signals, actually picked up a super strong signal coming from deep space. And it was exactly at the frequency scientists said that aliens would probably use to contact us. And it was called the hydrogen frequency, just for some context. These Russian scientists, they claimed to have found the wow signal of our genetic code. So what they did was they took the entire genetic code of every living thing on Earth and tested it for hidden mathematical structure. And what they found apparently should not have existed. They found precise patterns and symmetries and a built-in decimal structure. They calculated the odds of these patterns arising by chance, and it was less than 1 in 10 trillion. So they said that it was like finding a hidden message in our genetic code and called it the wow signal of DNA. Because just like the radio signal, this seemed too perfect to just be a coincidence. Their conclusion was simple, that these patterns looked like a signature, the kind of mark an intelligent mind would deliberately embed as a watermark in the one place that could survive billions of years in our DNA. So then the question now becomes, who or what could have seeded us? Octopus aliens. They are the ones that seeded us. That's a fucking scary image though. I can't remember where I got that from.
It's an eye.
Alien with an eyeball. But to understand this, we have to look at something equally fascinating, which is the Cambrian explosion, which happened 540 million years ago. So the Cambrian explosion was a rapid, explosive increase in the diversity and complexity of life, where highly complex multicellular organisms just seem to appear suddenly out of nowhere. Before this period, for literally billions of years, life on Earth was entirely microscopic, single-celled organisms. And then, suddenly, life just sprung up and became complex. And this leap was so baffling that in 2018, a team of 33 highly respected researchers published a peer-reviewed paper questioning this exact event. The paper was titled Cause of the Cambrian Explosion, Terrestrial or Cosmic? And in the paper, they put forward the hypothesis that 540 million years ago, meteors might have actually dropped frozen eggs of new species directly into our oceans. Eggs. Like the meteors contain eggs and it fell into our ocean.
So it was like a baby boom?
Yes, in a sense.
Damn.
So this was one of the answers they had, but it wasn't conclusive about why suddenly 540 million years ago there's just an explosion of complex life that happened.
So meaning to say there's a possibility that like our future selves traveled in space-time and then seeded us back to Earth.
What makes you think it's our future self?
There's this whole running theory right now that aliens are actually just our future selves.
Yeah, maybe our future self came here when we weren't around yet. They seeded us, then they fucked off, go back home to party, and then now they are ready to collect us. Now they are ready to check out what's happening. Like a little garden, you plant the weeds, then let it grow, then you come back and check on it. And to back this up, the whole egg falling into the ocean theory, the paper focused on one animal, and it was the octopus, because this weird little fucker drops right into the evolutionary timeline out of nowhere with mind-bending traits. So let's have a closer look at this octopus. I mean this alien. An octopus does look like an alien though. Like if you were to travel to another planet, let's say, and you see an octopus on the floor, you'd be like,
what the heck is that?
That's a fucking alien.
So they have multiple organs.
Yes, they do. And they have, as many of you know, they have 8 arms and they also have 3 hearts and even blue blood that turns transparent when it's cold. I didn't even know that. I knew that they had blue blood, but I didn't know it turns transparent.
I didn't know it turns
cool. That's
transparent.
So cool. That's what, alien. Octopuses
and
are
they are
alien.
very smart also.
They are super smart. They're extremely smart. And speaking of smarts, the octopus has a completely decentralized brain, meaning that 2/3 of its neurons are actually located in their arms, letting them basically act independently. Imagine your left arm right now has a brain on its own and it can move, and slap you when you're being a fool. But the real kicker is how the octopus programs their own genetic code. So they don't just read their DNA like other living creatures do. They edit it in real time inside their own nervous systems in response to their surrounding temperature, environment, and even experience. Meaning they can literally rewire their own brains in response to the temperature changes. Something like a real-time biological adaptation without changing their DNA. And no other class of animal can do it at this level like the octopus can. But if these features evolved gradually through normal Darwinian processes, we should see a step-by-step process in the fossil and genetic record. But we don't. So how did they get these features? Why are octopuses so special? So the octopus seem to appear in our fossil record with these very unique and advanced features already in place. So the paper suggested that cephalopod eggs that were cryopreserved had arrived on Earth inside icy comets during the Cambrian explosion. Then my question is, where did these eggs come from? I mean, the eggs were in the asteroid and it landed on Earth, but where did the eggs come from? Who created the eggs? Was it an alien octopus species?
What if it's just part of their animal life form on their planet and then they just decided to send it over to Earth as well?
Here's some octopus eggs. Have fun.
Maybe octopus is part of their DNA genes also.
Yeah, so they could be octopus-like aliens.
Yeah.
But I've never heard of an octopus alien species before though. I know there's the greys, the tall whites, but I've never seen an octopus alien other than in Pirates of the Caribbean, Davy Jones, that guy. Yeah. He looks like he could have seeded us. And speaking of alien entities, there is another theory on who could have seeded us. And it all stems from mushrooms and how they are actually intelligent. Yes, mushrooms are intelligent, but wait, hear me out. I know it sounds fucking crazy. It sounds fucking crazy to me too, but just wait. Listen to this. So this theory, which is probably the most fun theory, comes from Terence McKenna. And I think some of you may have heard of him before. He's actually quite a popular and famous figure. And he's a philosopher, lecturer, and psychedelic researcher who proposed that mushrooms contained an alien intelligence. He unfortunately died in 2000, but his work has been widely discussed and championed by many advocates. His theory involved psilocybin mushrooms. And psilocybin mushrooms are basically mushrooms that contain psilocybin, which is a psychedelic compound. And psilocybin mushrooms, they are pretty damn unusual. For one, their spores are very resilient. They can survive temperatures from near absolute zero to well above boiling point. They can also withstand extreme radiation and the vacuum of space. So they are something like the extremophiles that we talked about earlier. They can survive super harsh conditions. And my question is, why would a mushroom spore need these defense mechanisms? Why the fuck does it need to be able to survive deep space? McKenna proposed that fungal spores might have traveled between worlds, drifting through interstellar space, surviving for millions of years in a state of suspended animation, and occasionally falling into the atmosphere of a young and wet planet. And once it had landed, it would start to take over the planet. Literally, because mushrooms have the ability to create a mycelium network. It's a deep undergrowth of, I guess you can call it hair-like veins. So mushrooms are not what they appear to be. The mushrooms that we see on the floor, like these tiny little buds, is just a small part of the mushroom. The larger organism lies underground and it's called a mycelium network. And the mycelium network is a vast branching neuron-like web that can stretch for many kilometers. It's like nature's World Wide Web. Mycelium networks are known to be electrically active, capable of information transfer between plants and trees, and they even exhibit problem-solving behaviors that look surprisingly cognitive, like our brain's neural network. I mean, if we see a comparison between the pictures, it kind of looks
similar.
Yeah, it looks similar.
It does look. Have you actually seen videos of how there's like a race between different types of spores? In the petri dish, they put an oat in the middle, and then there's like different spores, and then it will be like a race to see which network is smarter to reach.
Do they place bets on it? So yeah, mycelial networks, the human neural network, and the interstellar cosmic web, they look really similar. And I think it's more similar to the human brain network, human neural network. Mycelial networks, they are electrically active also, and so is our brains. We send pulses that send messages and signals to the rest of our body. So McKenna proposed that this network was not just biological, it was a communication system. But who are they communicating with? Well, according to him, they are communicating with other mycelium networks on other planets. So they are in some sense like the nervous system of a galactic civilization. And when we consume psilocybin, it opens a temporary connection to it, proposing that there are other mycelium networks on other planets.
Okay.
You know, that these intelligent spores have landed and evolved and grown.
What you're trying to say is, if we were to take psychedelics, it opens a portal, in our head?
Yes.
In space?
And that's
bro.
exactly where we are going to right now. Because that's why so many people, according to Terence McKenna, that's why so many people who have taken psilocybin all describe kind of the same thing. They feel a very smart, intelligent presence or being guiding them or showing them the reality of the universe, you know, when they are on psychedelics. And that there was some sort of contact with something intelligent. And this has been reported across thousands of different users, across cultures and across centuries. For example, Amazonian shamans, they describe the same beings. Modern users in clinical trials also describe the same things. The encounters sound too consistent to be entirely random hallucinations. And by the end of his life, McKenna had assembled all of this into a single sweeping theory, and it sounds pretty fucking wild. This is continuing to blow my mind. So he proposed that an ancient intelligent species that was distributed across the galaxy as a fungal informational network had seeded young planets with spores for billions of years. Those spores took root, integrated with local biology, and slowly began their work. And on Earth, they have been preparing us through every shamanic tradition on Earth, religious experiences, and psychedelic chemistry, all for eventual contact. This alien species is playing the long game, with the eventual goal of having a symbiotic relationship with the planet it seeded. We would then become galactic citizens.
What? That sounds insane. I'm not gonna lie.
Can you imagine if that's true though?
So if we hypothetically, the whole Earth, every one of us were to take mushroom at the same time together.
It doesn't have to be the same time, you know?
But like, what I'm hearing is if we were to all take mushroom at the same time together, we would all be able to communicate telepathically at the same time.
I don't
to
know
each
if it's
other.
telepathically, but I think we will feel more grounded or maybe spiritually awakened, that it will unlock a certain maybe frequency in our minds to...
Jeez.
I don't know, man. From the stories I've read, like people feel like they are tapping into some other dimension or consciousness when they're super high on psychedelics, you know? A lot of people report like elves were around them, kind of talking to them or like trying to communicate something to them. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed tonight's video. Yeah, it was very fun to research on panspermia. Why are you looking at me like that? What?
Where's the conclusion?
No conclusion. The conclusion is...
That we should take